I'm Justin Snyder.
And I'm Stephanie Greenwood Snyder.
We're just an average, everyday couple.
But over the years, we've seen the incredible importance of building community together.
We'll be talking with friends and experts about their stories and experiences to help us learn and grow.
We don't want to just survive through life.
We want to intentionally thrive.
This is the Intentional Thriver. Welcome to this episode of the Intentional Thriver, the podcast where we ask the question, am I thriving or just surviving?
That is the question.
That's
and
the
yes,
question.
It is a podcast.
Thank you.
Very
Okay,
good,
I
very
did
good.
it. Awesome. Well, we'd like to welcome on this episode of the podcast, dear friends, Joshua and Diana Adams. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We know you're very busy people.
Pretty soon, it's going to be Dr. and Mr.
Ooh.
Adams.
That's right.
There's
That's right.
that.
Yeah. She's very clear that it goes once she gets the doctorate, she is expecting me to call her Dr. Adams.
Good.
Yeah.
As you should. Always.
Working hard for that. So absolutely. Well, for those who know the show, we always start off by saying something we appreciate and admire about our guests. And man, we have known Josh and Diana for a hot minute. We go back.
Yes.
Josh and I used to play soccer together back in the day.
Mm.
Josh is like, "Hey, I'll play keeper. I'll play goalie." I'd play defense. I'd play center D, and so obviously the goalie and the defenders work very closely together. And one of the roles of the goalie is you have a very unique perspective over the entire field. And like as a defender, obviously you're trying to, defend it, control it. Like you have like your little squad that you're communicating with, and like you can see part of the field. But the goalie, really, a good goalie can see the whole field, and he can like cast vision and say like, hey, so-and-so's open. He can see how plays can open up opportunities for players to be able to, get the midfield and the offense to score. And I remember Josh was really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
And he still is.
Communicating.
And communicating that. And I think he still is. And that's why, you've been very successful in business and community, and why we partner on multiple projects and things like that, is that you are really, really good. And I really respect this about you, your ability to see a goal, see a vision, see an opportunity, and then communicate to the people who are involved in getting the ball to that point to be able to score. I just remember that from like the very first. How many years ago was that? 10 years? Something?
It was about 11. Yeah,
10 or 11 years ago. And I mean, the rest is history.
Definitely
at
over
that
10, because
point.
it was before we were married. So,
Yeah.
And my perspective of Diana is a little different, because I remember the day Joshua fell in love with Diana. And it was like 24 hours after you met her, I think.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So.
And she didn't get to see him play soccer right away. So
no, they
like,
played Ultimate Frisbee. That's how they fell in love.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And that was...
He tackled her, right?
I think
Like,
so. Took her right down. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I remember Joshua was smitten.
Oh, yeah.
Smitten. And yeah, I had known Joshua for a couple years by then, and that was it.
Good times.
Yeah,
Good times.
We've celebrated some really special things together.
Yeah.
And
No, you guys
to
are
have you.
very special friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast to talk about something that you are both very, very equipped to talk about, and something I think that you both are very passionate about as well, is leadership. I mean, and not just leadership in one specific area. I mean,
For sure.
local politics, business, nonprofits,
Church.
Community involvement, doctorate, church, like the list goes on and on and on and on. And so again, I think every single person listening to this episode, whether they're a CEO or whatever, any person, I think is able to learn something from this, because I think leadership affects maybe more people than sometimes we think.
So let's start off by just getting to know you guys a little bit.
Yes.
I mean, we've hinted that Diana's getting her doctorate, and so tell us a little bit more about yourself, Diana, and then we'll hear about Joshua.
Yeah, your story, your backgrounds.
I started college a little bit earlier than most. I started taking some courses in middle school and
Age
ended
of
up
6, right?
She looks young because she is young.
My mother gave me great genes,
Yes.
and I think that will continue to be beneficial to me as I get older.
All I got were sweatpants.
Yeah.
And so going through school, younger than most, going to college was an exciting experience, but I brought a lot of credits in with me.
Mhm.
And I took a full course load, which was great because I knew things that I wanted to do. At that point, I had gone to Penn State University for an elementary education degree, graduated with honors, really loved the research aspect of that that we do in the Schreier Honors Program. And then once I graduated, my mom had ended up moving down to Florida. So I said, let's trade in the snow shovel for the beach chair and let's move to Florida, which was a great decision.
Because she met me.
That's right.
There you go. That's
Obviously.
exactly.
A couple years later, but sure.
And so, in that transition, I originally had thought no one was going to hire. I think at that point I was a week after turning 19 or 20. So I thought no one's going to hire a teacher at my age. So I thought, let's explore some other opportunities. And about a month before school started, my mom asked me, you have an education degree. You have all the research you've done, prior to graduation. Have you applied to any teaching jobs? So to placate my mother, I applied to a couple teaching jobs and then was offered every teaching job that I had interviewed for, which was exciting.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it was the right decision because, of course, you just keep following the doors that God opens for you and pray that they're the right decisions.
Yeah.
But I ended up teaching for 7 years. Did meet Joshua in that time. At that point, I was living in a county south.
Mhm.
And so we kind of met up in the middle at a church close by to where we live now, which is great. But I taught for 7 years and loved it. My students were amazing. I taught 3rd through 5th grade over that time. That's where I knew you guys.
Yeah.
And then had started my doctorate degree, was also mentoring a couple other teachers on a bunch of different committees. I say yes to a lot of things, and that is partially my problem, is saying no is really difficult for me.
Mhm.
But then transitioned at that point to, the goal was to be a full-time doctorate student. That lasted about 2 weeks once I transitioned out from teaching because I finished most of my coursework for that semester in the 2-week time period. So I thought, what else could I do?
I told her I'd give you 3 weeks and you're bored. She was bored in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were way off.
You were way off, Josh.
You didn't know her.
Staying bored, right? She was doing double credits
Yep.
for her doctorate. So she was doing double full-time doctorate
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
and she was bored.
And stressing out that she was only 2 weeks early on her papers. I remember.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it was fun.
That you remember that?
I do. We just,
At this point, a friend of ours had come to me and said, actually, this nonprofit here locally is looking for an executive director. Would you consider the position? Which was something that I would have considered when I had finished the degree,
Right.
because the doctorate in public administration is meant to open doors in things like government, nonprofits, things like that.
sure. So it did 2 weeks into working. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
So I ended up saying yes. I interviewed with the board. They loved me. I thought it was a great fit.
Yeah.
I was in that role with Brevard Heart Foundation for about 3 years, and then have just recently transitioned out of that role as I am wrapping up the doctorate degree. So
Woohoo.
we look forward to kind of what's next.
Yeah.
Throughout the program, I guess about 2 years ago now, I did pause my coursework for a few months because I, as you guys know, decided to jump into local politics and try to run for our local city council here in West Melbourne. I was successful with that race.
Yes.
So now I serve as the youngest elected official, not only for my city, but for Brevard County. So it's super exciting, but a lot of responsibility. So you got to take everything in a little bit of a balance, but that's where we're at now. Now I, as of November, was selected as the city's deputy mayor. So I'm
Nice.
sitting in that responsibility chair, and then, involved in a lot of committees and nonprofit boards and things like that. But now we are getting so close to finishing with the degree, and then we're going to figure out what's next.
Wow.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, she'll eventually start doing something important.
Yeah, right.
Eventually.
Uh-oh.
Get your life together, Diana.
A couple of things she didn't mention. She won more awards as a teacher than I think is humanly possible. She
Yes.
won a state the
Like
Florida State
state.
Award,
Yes.
Social
Yeah.
Studies Teacher of the Year.
Mhm.
It's a couple Impact Awards. And she just kept bringing home awards
Yeah.
on that side of things.
They wanted
And
the short story.
not to mention when she ran for city council, she got the second most votes in city history, I believe,
Wow.
during a midterm election. So the only person to ever beat her was somebody that ran during a primary election.
That's crazy.
That's
And
crazy.
it wasn't even by that much.
That's so cool.
She completely did
Right.
really good with that.
I think it's so interesting, like with your guys' story, because Josh, we want to hear more about like your background too. Like Diana, education has always been such like a foundational, important part of your life, both in
Good
like
point.
what you've learned and what you've like given as well. And so
We
I
know
think
where
that's so
we know
interesting.
where you're going
where,
with this. Look at
You
Josh's smile.
So you got the total, you got her over here, went to college in her, early teens, and she had her, I think you had your master's by the time we were engaged, and almost done with a doctorate by the time she's 30. So you got all that on one side, and then on my side, I was homeschooled all the way through, zero public education
God bless you.
experience at all, and so she'll be like, "Yeah, you remember rings? Oh, never mind."
Yeah.
That's
why we were friends, Joshua.
That's right.
He has had none of the public school experiences.
None of
like
that.
Picture day or lunch in the cafeteria, none of those things.
Bus
but
rides.
he's still married to teacher.
I did. And so, did all that. I did a lot of the testing and stuff because I wanted to do it. I loved the testing and whatnot, actually going in. But that's because I was an extrovert in a family of introverts. And so being able to get out and see people was very exciting to me. But so I did that. And then all through my teens, I had a few small businesses that I ran. I had an online Lego store. I had a lawn care business. I had a plant business. When I was real little, I had a strawberry patch. It was my first little business. I was like 8 or 9.
I did not know that.
So I grew up just entrepreneurial, right?
Yeah.
And when I got into my teens, I started doing web design freelance.
Mm-hmm.
And so then from there, started my first web design business when we moved down here. So I moved down here when I was 18 from Pennsylvania to Florida. And so funny things, we're both from Pennsylvania, just came down at very different times.
Yeah.
And so did that, started my first web design business in my parents' garage. So I get the garage founder's story, which is fun. And at the same time, decided to go to college because I was crazy excited about learning more about my field, web design specifically. I lasted about a semester and a half and was bored out of my mind. I was offered my teacher's job my first semester. And it's like I'm making more from my parents' garage making websites, so maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a 4.0 dropout. And so the joke the joke in the early stages of our career was, our relationship, Diana goes, like you do care about education, right? Like, because this is going to be a problem.
Yes.
And so it's just been really funny because she talked about higher education on her side, and all of my education is School of Hard Knocks. Like, just get out and do it and get it done. Yeah. And so it brings a really interesting perspective.
Yeah,
because I do value education quite a bit. The path I took was different, right? I have a very entrepreneurial journey in a space like marketing, it's sort of web design into marketing, that you can learn on the job. And so it's just a really interesting, we bring very different perspectives on that, which is very, very cool. So did that for a while, merged the web design business with a marketing firm, and did that, became a partner. So I was a partner in a marketing agency at like 21, which is crazy. I had no idea what I was doing. I had employees, all this stuff. Did that for a few years, ended up going out on my own. After doing that for 3 years, had a little bit of a discovery as soon as I became president of that, I discovered there were some things weren't being done the way they should be. And so I made a goodbye exit very quickly when I discovered some stuff with the numbers to start Rock Paper Simple back in
2013. You started at the same year that I graduated.
That's right. So I started in 2013, January of 2013, with $700 to my name and a whole bunch of tax debt from the failed partnership that was just wonderful. I remember walking into the IRS office and going, I think I owe you guys a bunch of money. Like, why? Who does that? So launched Rock Paper Simple with a prayer and a dream and an idea. It was a web design business, and it just was awesome. It just took off. We hit the goal the first year, exactly double and a half, and it just kind of took off from there. It went from a web design agency. We added branding. We added digital marketing side of things. Stephanie came on in year 2, I think. Year 2 you came on?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
2014, yeah.
Yeah,
Right after we got married.
Yep. And it was funny because I had known Justin first, and when Justin first said, "Hey," I'm like, "Oh, great, here we go."
Yeah, exactly. It's like, is this going to ruin our friendship?
How do I say this? And then of course and it was like, "Oh yeah, okay, we got a rock star here."
I don't pick losers to bury.
It's always funny when a friend introduces you to
100%. 100%.
Right? And it's like, how do I tell my friend?
Yeah.
It ended up being a great run of 7 years. We did a lot of cool stuff together.
Yeah.
And we could fill 3 podcasts.
Oh my goodness.
Just the basics of what you and I did.
Goodness.
And so fast forward to today, it's a 20-person agency, full service. And it has been a wild ride in terms of learning to be a leader, learning to lead a small business. What does that mean? A lot of nonprofit leadership experience in there as well. And so when talking about leadership today, my whole life has been leadership in some capacity, whether it was business or community leadership or nonprofit leadership. And so that's kind of my background in a nutshell. Today, I split my time between running the agency and I do a lot of consulting work now. So I'm a fractional chief marketing officer for 3 other companies. So I sit on their leadership teams fractionally. And that's been a lot of fun as well. So getting the exposure to 3 other brands, 3 other leadership teams, 3 other totally different ways of leading, if you will.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the journey, my career journey on that side of things.
My goodness. So for those listening, these 2 are actually qualified to talk about leadership. Again, it's not like one is purely academic, one is purely like getting your hands dirty, because I think you guys have done both in many ways. And so again, you're able to speak from a beautiful blend of like knowledge and experience at the same time. So like, to me, leadership means so many different things to so many people. It's a term that's just thrown out all over the place. I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you guys? Like that term, that idea, that mindset of leadership. What is that? What does that mean?
So I think my favorite approach to that is a statement that's been painted on my office wall since I started Rock Paper Simple, and it's empower talented people. So that when I first started Rock Paper Simple, it was in these black frames with orange lettering, which looked awful. But the team eventually put, I think out of pity, bought me these really pretty frames and designs with these statements. But one was a scripture that was basically do all in the glory of God. And the other one was empower talented people. And that's been on the wall for 11 years now. And in my mind, it's all about how can you really empower others to do great things or bigger things, or cast a vision in a way that allows those people to reach heights they didn't realize they could reach, right? And for me, when I look back, I see successes or wins, the ones that really stick out to me are the people that I lifted up. And when I see people in a better place than when I met them, and I had a part of that, that always gets me going. That always gets me really excited. And I love that concept of being able to say, I came in, I was able to coach these people up. I was able to provide a vision, and look where we went, look where they went.
Yeah.
I really think true leadership goes beyond just accomplishing your goal, if you will. And it's leaving people better off because of that leadership. I've always been proud of where people went after they worked for me, right? So you look at people who've come through Rock Paper Simple or any of the other things that I've worked on, and when I can see where they went, that is very, very, very exciting to me.
It's amazing.
Very cool.
How about you, Diana?
I think about leadership in terms of, in the same but a slightly different vein, having a positive impact. And that impact could be in your business or where you're working, but it could also be in your community or just within the influence of your family. I think a lot of people view leadership as someone taking charge.
Hmm.
But what they don't think about are the types of leaders who lead quietly and do more with compassion and empathy for others.
Yeah.
That is such, I think, an underrated quality in our leaders today.
Yeah.
When you think about the needs of our community, leadership is wherever people are stepping up to make that impact. And sometimes those are opportunities that we shout from the rooftops because we're proud of our friends and the impact that they've been able to have. And other times it's just quietly doing the work, knowing that there are others who you may know or people you may never meet who will be better because of the work you're doing. To me, that's leadership.
So good.
That's so good.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on this, that leadership could be for anybody, anywhere, any time of life. Why do you feel like it's important for every person to grow in their leadership skills?
Yeah.
I think it's especially important because we all have the opportunity to influence the lives of other people and to influence the world that's around us. So for a stay-at-home parent, that could be impacting the lives of your children. For a business leader, that could be impacting the colleagues you work with or the team that you serve with. Someone plugged in at a church, that could be, the hours you spend volunteering on a Wednesday night service or a Sunday morning service, the people that you're interacting with, how are you impacting their life? Yeah. So I think we all have the capacity for leadership, but we have to recognize where are our strengths, where are you going to thrive as a person, and how can you use the gifts that you've been given in order to make a difference?
We all influence someone, right? That was what she led with. But I think we sometimes downplay our own influence and don't realize how much of an impact we do make. I was talking to a client of mine the other day, and he made the comment. He goes, I don't know if God cares about this little business I'm running. And I'm like, oh no, I challenge you on that. Do you understand the influence you have? You have 50 some employees. You have thousands and thousands and thousands of clients.
Whoa.
You have a marketing reach that reaches hundreds of thousands, if not more. I think you have a larger influence than you think.
For sure.
And and it was interesting to dig into. Now, granted, that's an extreme case, right? But we all influence more people than we think.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
that's so good. Like again, I think, like you guys are saying, it could really just let's take the word of leadership and just say leadership equals influence.
Yeah.
And when you look at it through that lens, every single person has that ability, and not only ability, I would say responsibility to be aware of that and to make a positive influence and a positive impact on people's lives. What would you say? Because I mean, again, every person is so different. There's so much variety. Are there different styles of leadership? Are there different ways for people to be able to lead, healthy? I mean, again, we could talk about good, bad. I'm sure there are good and bad ways to influence, to lead, but are there different styles of that? And then kind of paired with that, how does someone kind of discover their own style, their own voice when it comes to leadership?
Absolutely. There's different styles. I think you have some that are more direct, some that are more of an influential type. Some are more lean more to that servant leadership. Some are more going to just kind of blaze forward with what that looks like. And I think that as you're developing your own leadership style, some of that's going to lean towards your strengths. It's going to lean towards, and I think there's kind of two sides of that. Some of it's going to be, hey, I'm naturally good at a thing, and therefore that shapes your style. But I also think a lot of it's learned. A lot of it, one thing that I did a lot of early on was seek out mentors and ask questions. And how do you lead? And tell me how you lead your team. And hearing and seeing what works. Frankly, learning what doesn't work. Right? Yeah. Having some poor leadership decisions and going, oh, okay, don't do it that way.
Yeah.
But I think allowing that to shape what you're doing, but also embrace what are my strengths? Where can I tend? So, for example, I tend to be more of a influencer coach style leader, right? I tend to want to coach someone up. I tend to come in and want to provide influence and cast vision. I'm a little less direct. That doesn't mean that's right or wrong. It means it's my style. It means that I can be a little weaker on the direct encounters, right? When I need to have that direct conversation, I might stress out a little bit more than somebody else might.
Sure.
And so I might need a little bit of a push. Sometimes Stephanie needed to say, hey, I need you to step up on this thing. Stop, and that was helpful to have somebody else in that space to say, no, I need you to speak a little harder on this. I think it's identifying what are my strengths. And that also, as a good leader, you're surrounding yourself with people who can complement those.
That's good.
And something that we still use a lot, that Stephanie and I used a lot with Marketing for Simple, was the DISC profiles.
Yeah.
And evaluating what is the kind of work personality that you bring to the table. Yeah. Are you more direct? Are you more influential? Are you more of a detailed person? Are you more of a people person on those sides of things? And that can help you understand yourself when you start digging into that. And we did a few of those types of profiles. We do actually do a couple more than we didn't even do back then now. But it allows us to see, one we do a lot now is Colby.
Oh yeah, Colby. Yep.
And it talks. We didn't do as much of it back then,
but I have done it.
I believe that. I believe that. And so, I am a 9 on the quick start. Like I am on the quick start, and my follow through is like a 3, right? Yep. And so that creates some challenge when when I'm that. And so being able to know that about myself allows me to know I'm going to be very quick to new ideas. I'm going to be very excited about new ideas, but I need to be able to temper that as well to not create the whiplash. So
that's right. Yeah, that's good.
I think for that same token, you have to be willing to, if you want to develop your leadership skills, be willing to not only find opportunities that are around you, but be willing to step outside of your comfort zone in order to develop those skills.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier at a Bible study that growth does not happen without some discomfort. Right. Growth and change are things that as humans, most people are against because it's hard and it's uncomfortable. But if you put yourself in situations or take opportunities that may not be your first inclination, you're going to interact with other people. You're going to be challenged to try new skills and become, hopefully, a better person. In my regard, when we had moved to West Melbourne, where we live now, I had immediately started looking for opportunities to serve and give back to my community, because that's my heart for public service. It's why I became a teacher. It's why my degree's in public administration. It's part of what drew me into local government. All of those things, I was looking for ways to get plugged in. And so I ended up serving on a couple of the different city advisory boards that review policy, because those things impact the lives of others. And that's what I wanted to do. And then making that jump into running for local office, that if you had asked me 5 years ago while I was teaching if I would have ever run for office, I would have laughed you right out of my classroom, because politicians are crazy.
They are
obviously
crazy.
Now I've learned most of them are crazy. You have to be willing to be a little crazy and step outside of your comfort zone if you want to do hard things. Because if we don't have people willing to step up and do hard things and try something new for yourself, you're never going to know the impact you could make.
That's good.
And so that's what I would encourage people. If you're trying to develop yourself as a leader or even find new skills, take the new opportunity, bring on a new mentor. Don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone.
It's good. Wow.
It's really good.
So as we're talking about leadership and style and where to be a leader, let's also talk about who are leaders, because there are times where we kind of assume CEOs are leaders or mayors are leaders, of course, but there are times when you're a leader and you're under the authority of a leader as well. So how do you balance that between, Joshua, you go from being CEO 1 minute to a fractional leadership team member. So how do you balance between going back and forth?
First of all, it at first was very difficult.
Yeah.
Going from being used to always being in charge, right? I was always the one making the decision. It was always coming down to me. And so there was a couple times I had to catch myself in meetings when I went to say, I went, actually, this is not my call, right? There was a couple times where I had to stop myself and go, wow, this isn't my call. I think I've really enjoyed it. it's been interesting. I didn't know how I was going to handle it, honestly. And I've had some challenging and as well as the learning experiences where I didn't agree at all. There's some times where I'm like, I don't agree at all with this direction, but this is the vision being cast and I'm here to support it. And I can have the disagreement. But once we decide we're going in this direction, we got to be a united front to go get it done. And so I would say that's the balance, right? There is a healthy level of conflict to be had amongst leaders that are peers, as well as with direct reports. There's a healthy amount of conflict there that can be had as long as it's done in a productive way. But once the conflict is done, once the conversation is done, this is also an EOS principle. Now that I'm 100% bought into EOS at this point.
Wow.
There's a concept that says the leadership can have conflict behind closed doors, but once you're done, once a decision has been made, you leave there arm in arm, united front, go get it done, right? And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see with that kind of leader who has a leader who maybe leads up, kind of that point. It's making sure that you are capturing the vision, that's being cast down, that you're aligning yourself and your team with that. But then when you have the conflict, making sure that when that conflict is done and that productive conflict is done, that you're coming out as a united front. I think that's really, really important.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think my perspective on that is a little bit different because the different, experiences that I've had. I view whether you're in a primary or a secondary leadership role, my preferred style is to lead by example. And so no matter which seat you're in for that particular time, whether it's, up on the dais for city council, leading the nonprofit, or, being part of a leadership group as part of a volunteer nonprofit board, or just serving your community, you still have the opportunity. Those skills don't go away, right? The skills that you've developed are still there. And to me, if you're going to lead by example, that means you should constantly and consistently be showcasing the skills that you bring to the table. And for a lot of leaders, especially if you're going to be, in my opinion, an effective leader, that would involve, regular and clear communication, fostering an inclusive environment, and making sure that you have solid collaboration. All of those things, whether you're the person leading the meeting, it's your responsibility, or whether you're part of the team, those skills need to be happening at all times, because we don't get nearly as much done on our own as we do together, right? It's that idea that together we can have more of an impact. So all of those things need to come together if you're going to achieve a goal. And so, as a leader leading the team, you want to make sure you're showcasing those capabilities and encouraging your team and bringing them together for one goal, similar to what you were saying. But for the same token, when you're just another part of the team, every person on that team has an important role to play. And your responsibility is making sure you're doing the best you can. And I'm hoping that by being the best board member or the best volunteer or whatever role I'm sitting in at that moment, that's hopefully inspiring others to realize, let's all bring 110% to this goal. And not only will we get it done faster, but it's going to be ultimately more impactful.
Kind of along with that, there are going to be times as a leader where you have to make a tough decision, an unpopular decision, a difficult decision. How do you find balance in that between making those hard decisions that not everyone is going to agree with, not everyone's going to be on board with, whether they be peer level or below direct report level, whatever it may be? How do you balance that and pair that with the things that you're saying about encouragement, motivation, keeping people arm in arm moving forward? How do you find balance in that as a leader?
First of all, when you're making tough decisions that aren't necessarily always going to be popular, and sometimes it's hard because the team doesn't have all the context, right?
Sure.
And you sometimes can only give some of the context. And so I think it's important to build the trust first before you get there. So building the trust before you get to the hard decision, I think, is really key. I think that being willing to be transparent when you can be is also key. Sharing that, and this is funny, I used to think, okay, my job as the CEO, as the leader, is to shoulder all the stress and all the burden and all the fear and all of that, hold all of that on my shoulders. Don't let the team see any of that, protect them from that. And only cast vision and tell them what they need to know, et cetera. And I realized later in my leadership journey, that was actually really, really wrong.
Yeah.
Because oh yeah, no, it did. And you were there. You saw. Yeah, it made me. First of all, it made me very sick, and it took some time to build that back. It's not healthy, but at the same time, it actually didn't foster the same kind of trust I was hoping to build. Because I ended up with this like hero complex, if you will.
Yeah.
That I'm protecting everybody from this thing. And it made me less of an effective leader because now I had to be the hero. I had to do the late nights. I had to shoulder this.
Right.
And it became less about empowering the rest of the team to do amazing things and more about what can I push myself to do. And so I don't think that was an effective way of doing it. Yeah. Once I learned, yes, I don't dump everything on the team. Yes, there's certain things that I do shoulder. That's my responsibility from a leadership perspective. But if I can share it and I can let the team know and I can give them visibility into reality, into the path, into what they can affect, that starts to build a lot of trust. That starts to really build a lot of trust. If I can come and say, here's where I made a mistake, even more trust. I recall making some really big decisions with the team and having to say, hey, I screwed up. I made some bad decisions. And bad decisions were made because of those bad decisions. You were there when I had to kind of own to the team, hey, we're structured poorly. We made some other major issues here, and we've got to overhaul all of it. That, frankly, was a little scary. But long term has built a lot more trust with the team. So now I have to say, hey, we have to make this decision. There is more trust there, I think. And so it's a balance. It's figuring out how much can you open up to the team? Where can you be transparent to build that trust factor? I have team members now that a year ago, I would have told you, I don't know if I'm ever going to earn their trust. And now I have it. And I think it took some time, but it took that level of being consistent, being persistent, being transparent when I could.
And being purposeful.
And being,
he's been very purposeful, especially recently, to work individually on relationships with the team.
Yes. One thing that my leadership team asks, we do a one thing every year. The leadership will ask of each other, what's the one thing? And the one thing they asked for me this year was to focus on vision and culture. Focus on vision and culture. Let us do our thing, right? Because one of my goals last year, as you guys know, was to get out of the day-to-day right of things. And that was a huge step. Was to get the right leaders in place, and that happened. And they said, I want you to focus on the casting the vision and the culture of the team. Be more purposeful with that. And that's been really a lot of fun.
That's perfect. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Good.
Yeah. I will add to that in a transparency vein, something we're doing, and we talked about it back in the day about doing it. We never did do it, but the open book management, we rolled that out. And so that, it was a great game of business. You and I had talked about doing that. I think we dabbled in it. I don't know if we ever quite did. We never really.
We were,
we went
surviving.
And so we launched that, and that has been really cool.
Cool.
Basically show all the numbers, right? And so now some things are private, and those remain private. But literally about every other week, I get up and I show the P&L to the team, like the whole profit and loss statement. It gets pulled up on the screen, and we go through it. And we go line by line. If they have questions, we talk about it. They see when we have a profitable month. They see when we have a not so profitable month. And that has been very cool.
Yeah. Have you experienced any hard, tough things you've had to tell people, Diana, in your leadership? And
wait, you're telling me in local government residents?
Have you ever in local government had to say anything people don't like to hear? Or
obviously
the highest
not
voted youngest representative, Of course, everybody wants to hear what Diana says.
She's so popular, everybody just agrees with her.
Everybody disagrees.
That is not a true statement at all.
Bummer. If only.
But interestingly, that was actually a question that I sat down with other people that ran for office before I had even filed, because I wanted to talk to everyone, whether you had won your election, whether you had lost your election. I wanted to talk to everyone, hear their perspective, hear about the process. And one of the questions I asked them was about, the decision-making process. How do you feel about your decisions that you've made in the past if you were in elected office? Or if you weren't in elected office, how do you feel about those decisions being made, that are moving forward? And I think that was a very interesting transition for me, especially being someone who, prior to running for office, I was more introverted. As you guys can tell from our background, I love to read. That's how I enjoy spending my time. But with this heart for serving others and wanting to be involved in my community and wanting, to kind of jump into this local government seat, that took, I think, a little bit of growth on my part in terms of understanding you will never make everybody happy, but we do have the responsibility to make the best decision that we can. And so for me, that meant gather as much information as possible. And we have top-notch staff at the city who do great heavy lifting in terms of, building plans and all of the things that come before a council to make policy decisions. They gather all of that in a very nice organized packet. And that packet ranges from anywhere from 100 pages to, I think one I saw a couple months ago was like 475.
Wow.
And they gather all that information. And then it's our responsibility to go through it. And then I write all of my questions. And I take the time, it's not required, but I meet with our city manager to ask questions ahead of time to make sure I'm understanding, and then to prepare him to gather any additional information he needs in order, for any other questions that may come up. So I think the responsibility for, trying to make the best decision possible means gather your information, ask your questions when you can, see if there's any other perspective that you might be missing out on. And at the end of the day, I pray before every council meeting and just ask for guidance and wisdom to make the best decision I can for all of our residents. And my goal is to finish the meeting and be able to go home and get a good night's sleep, knowing that the decisions I made that night were the best ones I could have made with the information I had.
That's good.
And that doesn't mean every decision is perfect. There have been, thankfully, only a few times, but, we're only 2 years in, but a couple of times where I've looked back and said, with the information I have now, I maybe would have made a different decision. However, you have to be able to give yourself and others grace in recognizing you make the best decision you can with the information possible, and then still be willing to hear people out. The city website has my personal cell phone number on it because I invite residents to call me. If you need something, if you have a question, whatever you need, I want to be there because I think that's our responsibility. Now that will also open you up to phone calls. Typically people don't call you to say, we loved the policy. Right. They will call you to express a concern or ask why you made the decision. As long as you're able to defend that decision with the best one, here's why I made it, but still be willing to hear them out, because every resident, whether they agree with your decision or not, or every team member at work, or every person in your friend group, they all matter. So you have to be willing to listen. Even if it doesn't necessarily change your mind.
That's so good. That's so good.
I was going to add one thing you do really well is you listen to the community. So I love that you went there.
Well, I think, Dinah, you made a statement in there that really stood out to me. You said sometimes you make a decision and it's not the perfect decision. And I think that's such an interesting statement, because that is the holy grail. That is this elusive, constant pecking in the back of mind of leaders sometimes, it's my responsibility to make the perfect decision. It's my responsibility to have the perfect solution. And the frustrating part is there's no such thing as a perfect decision. There is no such thing. You try to create opportunities where it's a win-win as much as possible, where the majority of people are, and sometimes it's not even about the majority of people. Again, the politics being a little different, but sometimes, especially as a business owner, it may not even be the majority of people are pleased, but you feel like it is the right decision based on your own worldview, your morals, your perspective, the information that you have at that time. And I think that can be one of the very difficult challenges of leadership, and one that needs to be addressed and accepted, is that there is no such thing as a perfect decision.
And sometimes it's deciding between two bad decisions.
But you have to make it.
Yeah, you still have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Definitely, I talked about this often. And one of the compliments she gave me early on that honestly I still comes to mind often is she goes, I love that you can make a decision. Like that you are not afraid to just go with it. And not that it's impetuous and not that it's ill-advised, but you know what? We have the information that we have. I wish I had more, but we're just going to go, and we have to go, because what can happen is you get stuck in this desire in the search for the perfect decision and all the information. And sometimes you just got to go and you got to make the decision. And I think that's can actually be the harder part is you're making the decision because it needs to be made. You wish you had a little bit more info. You wish you had a little more time. You wish you had a little more. And that was something that I think we did very well when we were working together was, okay, we have what we have. This is the decision we're going to make. And there were times we made that decision and we had to roll it back. I mean, there were times like, oh, that was a bad decision. But we made the decision, right? And we were able to iterate. And I was reading recently, I think it's in Who Not How or 10X is easier than 2X. Both are Dan Sullivan books. And it was talking about the myth of 10,000 hours to make you an expert. He says, I think it's more 10,000 iterations. Right?
That's good.
Decide, adjust. And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Oh, that's really good.
So for people out there who are like, okay, I understand that leadership is more of an important role in my life than maybe I thought in the past, or I want to be a better leader with my team, with my family, peers, whatever it may be. It feels like, based on what you're saying, some of the stuff, Josh, you were saying earlier about stuff you have to learn and grow in, it feels like there's a muscle aspect to leadership that you can grow and improve in over time. For someone who doesn't feel like a strong leader, what are some ways that you would encourage them to grow, some ways that you would encourage them to work out that muscle, if you will?
I would say three things come to mind. One, know thyself. Just and don't stop once you think you know yourself, because you still don't. Keep digging. Figure out ask yourself questions, ask others questions about yourself. I will often ask, how did this come across? To Diana, I'll say, did you think that sounded right? Or I'll finish a presentation to the team and I'll take a leader out to the side and said, did I get across what I meant to get across? Be a student of how you come across, because we assume that what we meant to say came out, but very often that is not the case. I think being willing to kind of try to discover more about yourself and how you tick and how you operate. Like, for example, I know as a leader that I like bullet points. Get to the point. I like the bullet points. I had to know that about myself. And then also know, Justin, when you worked for me, that you liked all the details.
I give you bullet points, but I'm going to give you 10 sub-bullet points to that bullet point, because you got to understand why I got to that decision.
A couple footnotes of those in each of them. But I had to evaluate. It'd be easy as the leader say, no, I'm in charge. Just give me bullets. And there was one meeting in particular I remember you and I had. And you came in and you were prepared. And I'm looking at my watch and go, oh, shoot. And you start going, and I almost cut you off. And I was like, well, what's I was asking for the highlights. And I stopped. And I said, for you to feel respected on this decision, I need to hear you out, don't I? And you said yes. And so I did, right? And I wasn't trying to be rude or disrespectful. I realized that I needed to adapt my communication style, right? And that was knowing me, but it was also knowing you. And so I think it's knowing your communication style versus just getting frustrated, right? I would say second, seek mentors. Find others that can speak into you, leaders that you respect, people who can lift you up. Don't be afraid to ask the dumb questions. I mean, that was something that pride can hold you back from, especially once you're in it, once you have the title. It can be easy to say, well, I'd be embarrassed to go tell this person I don't know how to make this decision.
Yes.
Get rid of that ego, go get a mentor, get several mentors and learn. That was really, really big. So I think those are the two. And then the third one is do hard things. Be willing to make the hard decisions, be willing to take the risk, be willing to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen, right? And sometimes we get stuck in that fear, right? You had mentioned it earlier, of being wrong, of making a bad decision. And I've said this recently to a team member, is not being afraid to be wrong. It can be a superpower. Like literally, I was telling a leader that we were disagreeing. I said, listen, if I'm wrong, I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to be wrong, because if one of my team is right and I'm wrong, I want to know that. Yeah. But I think if you're so afraid to be wrong, you'll never go anywhere. Yep. So those are my three thoughts.
That's good.
I love that.
That's really good. It's finding that balance of like not being reckless, not just like going through life and consequences, whatever, being unaware or belligerent or obstinate to consequences, because decisions do have consequences. They do. Yeah. And so as you get older and as your responsibility grows, those consequences become heavier and heavier and heavier. Absolutely. And so, it's finding that balance of, I want to make the best decision I can, because sometimes consequences don't just affect you. No, they affect others around you as well.
Especially in leadership.
100%.
Exactly. Now that we have come to a lovely end of our podcast, we like to finish by asking, what does it mean to you to intentionally thrive?
So I would say that one of the coolest things that I think it comes down to, obviously, being intentional. It's in the name. But I think it's knowing where you're going, right? I think it's the first step to that. And then everything you're doing, making steps towards that. It's something that we've been doing a lot lately, has been thinking about the future. Where do we want to go together? And I think that has been really good for our marriage, especially. So we're aligned on things like, where do we want to be in 10 years? We've actually written that out. What are the top 5 or 6 things we want to be true in 10 years? What are the things that we want individually? What are the things we want together? We've defined what we want in 3 years. We've said, okay, what is our family mission statement? What do we stand for? What are our family core values? One of them happens to be do hard things. Right. And so that gets us aligned and makes us very, very intentional when we're trying to make a decision and say, okay, are we headed to what we said we wanted to do? Right. Are we aligned on that? We have in that plan, we have a giving strategy. We want to know how we want to give and where we want to give to. And it's very, very intentional. It's very, very purposeful, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's great.
I think, to me, thinking about, intentionally thriving, it requires you to consider what is your impact, and whether that is people, whether that's in your community, whether it's just your family, all of these things. In order for you to thrive as a person, as a community leader, as a business owner, as an employee, as a parent, whatever role you are in, thriving in that role means making sure that, you're making the impact that you want to make. Yeah. So whether that involves building relationships, whether that's giving 110% of yourself to a local cause that you believe strongly in. Yeah. All of these things, I believe, feed your soul and ultimately will make you not only a better person, but a happier person, a more fulfilled person. And I think when you do those things for others, you feel it within yourself, right? But by giving, we then receive. And so to me, I'm thinking, at the end of the day, if I, hopefully pass away peacefully in my sleep at
a long time from now.
At a very, very long time from now, that at the end of the day, I can say to the Lord, I used every gift. I used every ounce of energy. I tried to do everything I could to positively impact the world around me.
Yeah.
If I used everything I had, then to me, that is thriving. That's thriving for yourself. It's thriving for your spouse. It's thriving for your friends and family. And it's ultimately thriving and making an impact in your community.
Yeah.